Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. There's over 50 of you on the call today, and there's probably more joining in. We're waiting for people to catch up, but let's get going. We're recording the call. Everybody will have the opportunity to watch it again. And I'm super excited. I'm always very excited around the Christmas season anyway. For me, it's a time to remember what it was like to be a child. That's why I'm sitting right in front of my Christmas tree. If you don't celebrate, no offense, this is just something that's really big to me. And it's one of those things where you start to examine at this time of the year all kinds of different things. Unfortunately, a lot of times during this time of the year, we have things that are going on outside of our business that affect our business and affect the way we handle the end of the year. A lot of times it has to do with things that happened in the past, emotional things that have happened where you have had an effect, whether it be happiness or sadness or all kinds of different emotions. So for me, I really wanted to make the last call of the year for the Free Friday coaching calls very special. And many of you have experienced my wife before. She's done several calls on here where she stepped in my place when I was out, or I've interviewed her, or she's had guests on also. And she has personally made a big difference in my life by her mindset lessons that she's taught me over the years. And several things that come up for all of us at this time of the year. The major one is, listen to this, and I've said it before, I'm not enough. And this is the time of the year that I'm not enough's come up quite a bit. You're thinking about maybe relaxing and taking some time off. And then you say to yourself, well, I didn't get the results I got this year that I expected to get, so I don't deserve to take time off or relax. And all of these emotions are going on at the same time. In addition to people are throwing business plan workbooks at you and saying, plan your business for next year. And then you're struggling with, gosh, I really have to look myself in the face and be honest about whether or not these goals that I'm setting for myself for next year will make a difference or not, or will I change my habits, or will I still be the same person? But let's be real, ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, I'm not supposed to use those terms anymore. Let's be real, all y'all, that you can't, that you can't really look at, sorry.
All the people that live in California are laughing. Nobody else gets it.
Oh. No, I think Lucky got it. She was busting up in Michigan over there. So
I'm Arizona. I got it.
Yeah.
Vegas gets it.
Yeah. We talked about that. I taught a class in Lake Havasu day before yesterday, and we just laughed our butts off about me trying to be politically correct. So, but here's really what happens. People are examining this very important word called your results. Okay. And the person, my wife, that's going to talk in a few minutes, I'm going to ask her a few questions, taught me this saying: your results, while often harsh, are always fair. And when I first heard that, I was freaked out. I'm like, again, guess what happened when I first heard that? I went into, see, I'm not enough. See, I suck. See, I didn't do this like I said I would. See, and human beings don't do anything unless they get a reward. And sometimes the reward they're getting is proving to themselves or to ourselves that I suck. Okay. And so when I look at this last call and asking you to step into 2022, even step into the next few days, right? Today is the 17th. And if we look at January 3rd, Monday is the day that we all go back to work. We have 17 more days till then. What will you do? How will you show up over the next 17 days? So given this, I want to first tell you a few things about Casey, because some of you know her, some of you don't, but we met. I was teaching a class with another person in the beginning of 2005. And we were, the class I was doing was being taught at a Keller Williams office in Walnut Creek, California. And Casey was one of the students in the class. And she liked what she heard, and we started chatting, and she would show up to other classes I would do. And we became friends. And then she began pursuing me to take a personal development course in probably around 06. And then by 2008, 2 years of her pursuing me, I still hadn't really sat down and listened to her about why I should take that personal development course. And what I was witnessing in this young lady was, at the time, very persistent, very driven. There was 200 something agents in the office that she was in, and she was like number 12. And she'd only been in real estate like a year and a half. And so she had elevated herself. She'd done a lot of work on herself to become an amazing salesperson and an amazing human. And all of that work was coming as a result of her personal development courses that she was taking, and her willingness to grow as a bigger and better version of herself. We finally sat down to talk about this course in April of 2008, almost 2 years after she started talking to me about it. And in that 3-hour talk that we had at a restaurant, I was drinking iced tea with sweetener, and she was drinking mojitos. And in those 3 hours, I started to witness a young lady who had a lot of experience in results and life, and understood life at a very high level, even though she was much younger than me. And I used to think you couldn't understand life until you experienced it for the same number of years. And I had a different lesson on that day. So the effect of that first 3-hour meeting was we started dating, and then of course went from that to becoming a couple. And then we got married about almost 7 years ago. In fact, it'll be 7 years next month. So, but in that process, she had left real estate in the beginning of the end of 2008, and went into another industry and succeeded very, very highly in that industry, and started coaching people all over the world, essentially. And her coaching has really affected a lot of people's lives. So whether you're new or not to her, I want to introduce formally a woman who I have a lot of respect for, and of course a ton of love for, is my wife, Casey Council Jiha. So, and thank you all for getting on and sharing with her, sharing with me this time when I get to talk to her. So, honey, you have for years not only been a person struggling with results, but also learning to look at results in a very pragmatic way, if you will. And so, first and foremost, tell us a little bit about your just personal thoughts about results, and how we look at them, and how we can start to look at results in a different way, so that we're not beating up on ourselves and we're still growing.
That's a great question. Thanks for having me on this morning. Great to see so many familiar and friendly faces on video. For those of you that get on calls with me, you know I love the video component. I don't care if you haven't brushed your teeth or what you're wearing. It's great to see faces in this context. So thank you for those of you that are on video. So, results. In my experience, there is a spectrum, and I'm very familiar with the spectrum because I've lived and walked each piece of the spectrum. So on one end of the spectrum of results is, if I don't look or I don't pay attention, then it's not really happening. So kind of like if I'm going to sit on the couch and eat bonbons, but I don't have a scale in the house, then I'm not gaining weight. That's one end of the spectrum of results of like, well, I'm just never going to track anything. I'm just never going to look at anything. Ignorance is bliss. And then I don't have any judgment on it. I feel so much better about myself. And that is one spectrum on the spectrum of results that is very, very real. Now, the challenge with that spectrum is, or that end of the spectrum, is that deep inside every one of us that's ever sat at that end of the spectrum is this knowing inside that you're capable of more. And when you know inside that you're capable of more, and regardless of if you're looking at or being honest or willing to take responsibility about the results of where you're at, there's this little letdown that happens, because you secretly, if you were to be really honest, you know that I'm capable of more is possible. And I'm not stepping into it, right? So with that then comes this entire conversation of judgment and self-deprecation that takes your self-esteem, and kind of like what self-esteem that you do have kind of cuts you off at the knees, and it disempowers you because of being at that end of the spectrum of results. And then as you move up the spectrum, as you're moving up the spectrum is the awareness starts to increase, right? So the being willing to look. A lot of people have a relationship with accountability that they don't like accountability because they feel like it's, getting beat or shamed or forced or pushed. And so that can happen for a lot of people when they start to look at being accountable for the results, accountable for their activities that are leading to those results. However, I wouldn't say that's necessarily the most effective place to sit from a mindset perspective if you're going to start to create awareness around results. I have a friend that is, he's actually a really great mentor, and he uses this analogy in baseball. And it's about the pitch. And a pitch is a pitch is a pitch until you call the pitch. So same thing in life, we get to assign meaning to whatever those results are. And half the time we're making up a story anyway. So I find that in results can be the excuses, the justifications, the stories as to why not. And those don't do anything other than take us out energetically and destroy some more self-confidence, because as we buy into all of those stories or reasons or excuses or justifications, it doesn't do anything to strengthen and lift us and help us move forward. It just kind of plants us and gets us anchored even more stuck in that same spot, right? So at the other end of the spectrum, from bonbons on the couch with no scale in the house, and I'm eating the bonbons every night, but I'm not getting fat because I haven't weighed myself, so therefore I've never looked at the results. And I wear Lululemon, so they just keep on a stretching. On the other end of the spectrum of results is, wow, I realize that a result is just a feedback mechanism. That's all a result is. A result is a feedback mechanism of where my time and energy is gone and how effective I've been with my time and energy. And that is what's going to generate the result, period. So when you can look at a result as a feedback mechanism, now you can start to ask some questions about it. And those questions could be like, well, what is that result telling me? What have I learned about that result? What was effective in my actions, activity, or behavior that generated that result? And looking at that result, if it's not the result that I was hoping for or that I was really working towards, what was maybe missing or out or didn't work that had me end up where I ended up versus the result that I was actually going for. And so it now becomes a conversation around learning, around self-reflection, around awareness, not around judgment or a story or a place to be self-deprecating or beat ourselves up or compare ourselves to other people, right? There's a, and Rick knows this because I'm always showing him things because of how inspired I get by what people create, right? So there's a real estate sales team that looks, it's about the same size in number as his personal real estate sales team, their day-to-day sales business. And they're in a market where the average purchase price is a third of what the average purchase price is for buyers and sellers in the markets where his sales business runs. So a third of the price, same exact size sales team, and more than double the volume that Rick's team generated this year. Now you could look at that and go, oh, I'm shaming Rick and telling him he sucks. But Rick just had his greatest year ever in business, and it was an amazing year. So why is that a comparison? No, it's an inspiration, right? And so anytime we get information input, we get to choose the story that we write around it of those results and be demotivated by them or be inspired by them. And so one really powerful thing that I've seen be effective, and I talk about this a lot, is that comparison. A lot of people say comparison is the thief of joy. And I say comparison is an act of violence against oneself. That sounds pretty harsh, but comparison being an act of violence against oneself means that if you're comparing and using that comparison to make yourself less than, to beat up on yourself, to take anything that's going to be negative on yourself, then that comparison is an act of violence. And yet, if you look at results, like in the analogy that I just gave of the team that's got a third of the average sales price and double the amount of volume for the year for the same size team, we can look at that same thing, and instead of an active comparison where we beat ourselves up, look and go, oh wow, I am inspired by that, and started asking the questions of what were they doing effectively to create that, and what can I learn from that to move me forward into what's next, right? Because there's no hiding results any longer. Social media over the last several years, like everything's out there, and the more you look and scroll and see people posting things about their businesses and their life, the more you see people's results that maybe you wouldn't have any idea of what their results were before. And so it can become a very kind of slippery slope depending on the approach that you're going to personally take and the narrative that you write around results.
That was awesome. Go ahead. You can mute yourself. So I don't know how many of you got a lot out of that, but I'm really in touch with that, because I can remember throwing a party for one of my Keller Williams offices many years ago. And we just thought we threw the best party ever. We called it the end of the year party because we didn't want to offend anybody about anything. This is many, many years ago, and called it the end of the year party. And we told everybody how happy we were to be in business with them. We had 150 agents in our office. We had about 200 people show up for the party with spouses. So that represented about 2/3 of the office. So we were pretty excited. And we gave out awards to the people who were the biggest producers. We had different, units, volume, GCI, all of those different things. And we started getting horrible comments in a week after the party, because everybody said, I had my wife there and you gave that big award to that guy. And my wife said, why aren't you getting that award? And all these things about exactly what Casey just touched on is how we look at that. Instead of looking at it as a driving inspiration that I'm capable of doing that or more, we looked at it as it makes me feel less. It makes me feel not enough. Okay. Or I feel not enough because of that, hearing that. So there is there's also looking at that, because I love that she said comparison is like, what did you call it, babe? An act of cruelty. Is that what
Violence
you said?
and violence. Don't make me get violent.
Okay. So when you think about that, there was something else. When I heard the statement, my results, while often harsh, are always fair. The fair part was about that they are a product of my efforts, of what I did. All right. So we can be honest and intellectual, not gut feeling, but intellectual about the fact, yeah, my results are there because of what I did and didn't do. Only unfortunately, the human race is 87% negative, just because that's how we're built. All right. So you have to go from gut to intellect to say, I can fight against that. I can intellectually say, well, that's, let's look at it more pragmatically, if we will. So another saying that Casey taught me early in our lives together, was, I am not my results. So if you look at those two sayings, my results, while often harsh, are always fair, we're saying they're fair based on what you did and what you got out of it. But what about the second one? I am not my results. That is that who I am as a human being is not measured by my results. My ability to get where I said I wanted to go or not, I'm still an amazing human being. So honey, I want you, considering that you are a very high D, a driver, I'd love your interpretation of that one as you taught it to me many years ago, about 11 or 12 years ago. That was the first time I heard that, I am not my results. Can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so it's kind of just an extension of what we started to talk about, is when you take ownership of your result and make it who you are as a person, that's not who you are as a person, it's just a result you created. Right? So like, let's say in real estate, and somebody, let's say, is the number one producer in their market. But that doesn't make them the number one human being on the planet. But sometimes that person that's the number one is making that an identity of, I am the number one, period. That's who I am. And then on the other end of that spectrum is the person who's like, oh, I'm on the very other end of that spectrum, and so I am nothing. The result is the result. The result is not the person, right? So people generate results all day long. And those are not the same thing as your identity, even though some of us, to our detriment or to our ego, would like to make them our identity, right? They are simply a result. They sit outside of who you are as a person. You, the person, has generated the result, but the result is not the person. And so when we get really attached to our results and making a meaning out of them, it tends to not lead to, I've seen people lead themselves in very self-motivated places to being number one, and very self-alienating places with relationships by making that their identity. I've seen people on the other end of the spectrum about looking at their results, about being so far in their mind on the other end of that spectrum, where they then withdraw, don't plug in, don't put themselves in environments with people they perceive or feel are more successful than they are, or smarter than they are, or more effective than they are in some areas of life, because they feel so bad about themselves when they put themselves in those environments, because they're comparing themselves to a detriment because they've made their results personal. Results are not personal outside of who generated those results. And so again, it's making sure to detach the human being from the actual result. The connection is that the human being takes responsibility for those results that were generated. However, I am not my results.
Okay, so that, I love that. Two people commented on it, that it was a big aha, and that it relieves stress or pressure. And I want to say that culturally, okay, I'm 100% Lebanese. There's some people on here 100% Indian, 100% Chinese, whatever. Culturally, I see where people are 100% anything or have a real attachment to a particular culture. This is a bigger issue because in a lot of those cultures, you are judged on your results all the time. From the time you're born to the time you die, you're judged on your results. So there's two things in there. Well, we understand we're being judged all the time. So what are you doing about that? The biggest problem with judgment is once you know there's judgment there, then you start judging yourself based on your results. This is not a war you're going to wage with the universe, my friends. This is a war that's going on all the time with everybody around the world, no matter what industry you're in, or whether you're talking about academics, sports, work, money, it's going to be the same. And it's time. Oh yeah, look, let me just see really quickly what Priya said. I can't feel accomplished without the numbers thanks to my upbringing. And good, this isn't blaming. Priya's not blaming. It was her, what we do with our upbringing, you know what we all do? And this is another one that I'm going to ask Casey to talk a little bit about, is we decide something about ourselves based on our upbringing. Think of the true story, and I don't know the details of it, but it was related to me in detail many years ago about the two boys who were raised to abusive parents. And abusive in many ways: drugs, alcohol, physical abuse, verbal abuse, everything you can imagine. One of those boys grows up and is in jail for murder, drugs, everything you can think of. And the other boy is running a billion-dollar empire. They were both raised in the exact same environment, but they made different decisions about themselves based on what occurred in their life. Does that make sense to you? So we are meaning-making machines, and I'm going to ask Casey to talk about that, like I said. And we make up meanings about everything that happens. And the people that lead the most peaceful, enjoyable, successful lives are ones who have surrendered to making up meanings and just dealing with truth and facts, okay? And allowing themselves to be aware of how they show up, what they're creating, and what do they need to effectively change so that they can create differently, more different, right? So Case, talk a little bit, if you will, about that all of that emotion that we carry with you, especially around this time of the year. There's so much emotion, whether it be, pleasurable, effective emotion or ineffective emotion about things in the past where you made up your mind, even about the holiday season, based on what happened. I don't deserve this. Those different kinds of things. Talk a little bit about that, please.
Well, what I really want to talk about is the Facebook Live I want to do called Politics, Pandemics, and Pronouns. The 3 ways to divide all human beings. However, it's kind of a similar context, right? And that if you're going to make up a story, why don't you make up one that's going to serve you? That's the bottom line. If you're going to make up a story, why don't you make up a story that's going to serve you? And Rick, I'm really not clear on what you want me to be more specific and go deeper on.
Yeah,
based on
well,
what you
okay.
said.
That's good. I was actually going to clarify it in that comment. So the main thing that I want to clarify is, what does it mean when I say human beings are meaning-making machines? They make up a meaning about everything. But I also want you to relay in there some of your, I love what you just said about pandemics, politics, and pronouns. And that's a joke between her and I right now because of, you know, we hear all of our friends engaged in these arguments about things they don't control. You don't control whether your friend decides to get vaccinated or not. You don't control whether they have an opinion about whether wearing a mask means you're Republican. I'm like, what? Wearing a mask has a political affiliation? Like all of those things. And I don't get caught up in them. I don't, because I don't control other people's feelings, thoughts. But we are still meaning-making machines. I've done more work on myself about the meaning-making than almost anybody I know, because it affected my life so much by making up meanings to things that really had no basis in truth or reality. Okay, you all do it. I do it. We still do it. Don't act like you're different. So it was politics, pandemics, and pronouns, by the way, Bruce. So Case, I really want you to talk about that, because I've heard you do a talk to another organization outside of real estate completely, where you really went into depth about why we make up meanings and how it serves us, and also how it doesn't serve us. And by the way, when she says serves you, that's asking you, is it getting you where you want to go? If it's serving you, it's helping you get where you want to go in life. And if it's not serving you, it's not. But you notice she doesn't use the words good, bad, right, or wrong. We both work on using the words effective. Is it serving you? Is it working for where you want to go? That way there's no judgment attached to it. And you will be your harshest judge all the time. You'll say things to yourself that you would never allow other people to say to you. So go ahead and work on that a little bit, hon.
Yes. So here's the bottom line, is that every single one of us, and Zachary commented on it, that it's about shifting the minds. He said shifting the mindset's possible. A lot of people don't recognize the power of our subconscious mind has over our self-esteem, our daily actions, goal setting, negative self-talk, and life in general. You have to recognize what in your past program your subconscious in order to change it. So here's what I want everybody to write down. Got pen and paper? Gonna give you a second to grab it. All right. So from the birth, 0 to 4 years old, 50% of your subconscious brain gets programmed based on its environment and your interpretation of its environment. From 4 years old to 8 years old, another 30% of your subconscious mind gets programmed. So basically, by the time you're 8 years old, 80% of what love looks like, what good looks like, what bad looks like, all of these decisions that you make, your filter, I'll call it, the glasses that you wear, and how you see and how you perceive life, are developed, 80% of that. And then from the time you're 8 to 18, another 15%. So by the time we're all 18 years old, 95% of our subconscious brains have been formulated to be the lens that we view the world, ourselves, and others through. And based on those experiences, the point of your subconscious is it's the survival brain. It's the part that keeps you alive, right? So your subconscious brain makes sure that while you're sleeping, you're breathing and your heart's pumping. Your subconscious brain is where all your emotions actually sit. And there's a whole ton of stuff that you can learn and discover about the workings of that. But the bottom line is, the experiences we all have in life, we develop those lenses and those filters in the way we're going to choose to see life through. the ego develops in there, and the ego is responsible for keeping you alive when you're younger, which is a very important mechanism and facet. However, as we grow into adults, we really don't need those things anymore. Yet many of us operate from them just because we've never been made aware of them or learned about them or how to add to them in a different place. So let's say this. Let's say that based on, I'm just going to share a personal experience to give you guys an example. So I'm in 5th grade, which makes me, how old does that make me in 5th grade? It's been so long ago. Someone please put how old are 5th graders in the chat.
10.
Is it 10 or 11? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's 10. Okay, great.
Depends
People
when
with
your
kids
birthday
know,
is,
like
yeah.
right off the bat, 5th grade is 10 years old. So I'm in that, 80% already, right? And at the end of that school year, I ended up being awarded Student of the Year for the entire school for my teacher. This is amazing, right? So my grandparents come, my great grandparents come, my aunt and my uncle come to see me be awarded this award in the cafeteria. Now, my mom is loving, supportive, very much similar behavioral style and profile to I have, and I would say that her relationship definitely shaped a lot of who I am today. And I have a memory of before feeling very overwhelmed because I was an introvert and very shy. However, my mom and I walking to the bathroom to use the bathroom before this award ceremony, and a conversation that we had. Now, the conversation at the time was like an amazing conversation because my mom's come from was one of recognition and acknowledgement. So she was recognizing me and acknowledging me for how proud she was of me in that moment. And here's what she said. She said, I just want to, say like, man, out of the school of hundreds and hundreds of kids, like you won this award. This is a really incredible achievement. And next year you're going to be going to junior. And I want you to know how proud of you I am. She said, and next year you're going to be going to junior high. So, in junior high, there's going to be a lot of things that you haven't had in elementary school, like dances and parties and sports games. And due to our family and our values and our commitments around our spiritual life, you won't be taking part in any of those. So the opportunity for you to be acknowledged and rewarded in those things, is not going to be. And what she was saying was how proud she was of me in that moment. However, I'm 10 years old and my little subconscious brain hears that she's proud of me. However, it also hears that I have just arrived at 10 years old. I've reached the pinnacle of achievement in my life. That's the story that I made up off of a positive experience, right? And I didn't have that awareness at all. And I didn't get that awareness until I was sitting in a personal development class in March of 2006 as a 31-year-old. And the conversation that we were having is how the subconscious brain gets developed and the decisions it makes. And those decisions run you, meaning they run every fiber of your being, your filter, what you allow yourself to do, what you don't allow yourself to do. And when I started to go a little bit deeper and discover what was the belief that I developed about myself in that moment at 10 years old in a positive experience, and it was everything that I had deserved, I had already created. So the belief I developed was that I was not deserving. So as I looked into my life and I took an inventory of my life at 31 years old, I was in real estate and selling real estate full time. However, I never did any lead generation, God forbid. I just took whatever came to me. I never went out and got anything because I thought, well, whatever I deserve, I'll get. And that's how I was doing my business. And the business that I'd had before that for 10 years, where I was a clinical esthetician and massage therapist, I built all by referral. Not once did I do any marketing or advertising. People just heard about me. And I figured, well, if I'm good, people will hear about me. And I'll build a business and I'll keep working on getting better. But I never went out and asked for the business because I didn't feel deserving of it. I felt whatever showed up for me was what I deserved. That is a really strong realization to have at 31 years of life. I just put in the chat where I had that realization, and it is the personal development training that Rick referred to at the beginning of this call as he was introducing me. And so now with an awareness of, oh, wow, I have a belief in my subconscious that says I'm not deserving. And I understand that its entire job is to stay alive. Like the death of that belief, it's going to fight as hard as it can to stay alive. And that's just how we're wired. It's the survival brain. So in my life, I could see and look back how the decisions I'd made and the decisions that I had not made were anchoring the belief that I was not deserving and being right about the fact that I wasn't, creating evidence about the fact that I wasn't, because look, this happened and that happened, or this didn't happen for me, but it happened for them. And we were in the same spot at the same time, anchoring that belief that I'm not deserving and making it stronger and stronger and stronger. And so why are we talking about this at this point in the year when we're looking at the end of the year and going into the next year? Is because the intellectual mind is the reason and logic part of your brain that you can logically know that those things are not true. However, your intellectual mind functions like 9 functions per second, and your subconscious mind is over 7,000 functions per second. Which one do you think is stronger? Your subconscious is your driver. Your subconscious is your driver, right? And so much of looking at results and where I go from here is being and putting yourself in a place to increase your own personal awareness, what I call your blind spots. And, you know, all of us have them. And I don't know of a better place to go reveal them and get tools and skills to move forward than the work that Rick and I have both done with PSI seminars. However, that is an entire reframe. So if we separate the human and look at the results, and the results of what's happened since the awareness and the changes and the realignment, right? So if your intellectual mind says, I want to go here, and your subconscious mind is going off the other direction, your subconscious mind is going to win every time. Oh, I want to be in a relationship with somebody that's loving and supportive that I can partner with in life. And my subconscious mind's running and going, I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. I don't deserve it. Guess what kind of relationship I'm going to end up in over and over again with the same exact different face, same person. The subconscious mind is the driver, right? So yes, the great news is there's that 5% and there's the opportunity to align your conscious and your subconscious minds. However, that's work that most people won't be willing to do because it's not easy. It's the best work in the world that you can do from my perspective, because there is nothing more incredible than someone who's got their conscious mind and their subconscious mind aligned, and the influence and impact that they can have for, you know, life and communities and families and the people around us.
All right. Hold on, I'm muting. So that was a brilliant recap. And I love that you told that story. And you had told me that story many, many years ago in brevity and much more detail today. And thank you for that. The whole thing about making up your mind about yourself based on things is going to be different for everyone. I always like to say that I know a lot of people who are at 8 or 9 years old were asking themselves, how can I make money? How can I be more successful? And I'm like, why didn't I ask myself questions like that at 8 or 9 years old, right? There's, you know, at 9 years old, I fell in love with a Lamborghini in a magazine, right? So my whole life has been about, I love cars, I love airplanes, but I never said to myself, how can I make money while I sleep? Like, I've heard friends who were 13, 14 years old, their dads were telling them, son, if you really want to have a great life, learn to make money while you sleep. These are all things that I've heard since I was an adult, a grown-up. And I ask myself certain questions like, what was the environment like? I had a very positive dad, and he was successful in the terms of money. Back then, they called him an upper middle class person. That's what they called it when you made enough money to own a home and you had a car and you went on vacations. You're either middle class or upper middle class, right? And there's no judgment around that. It's just sort of where you got put. And all of these things.
I'm pretty sure that would be politically incorrect today. I don't know what it's called, but I'm pretty sure that's politically incorrect today. Rick, censorship here, censorship.
Thank you. Just like
oh, you're telling a story of the past. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
By the way, all of you, I live with her, remember? Okay, so when I think about it, I have spent almost $150,000 on me, on personal development, getting coaches, counselors, therapists, call them whatever you want, to understand more about why I make decisions that are either effective for where I want to get up, where I want to end up, or ineffective. I still make decisions that are ineffective. And at least now I have the intellect to go back and say, okay, what's the root of that? Why do I make these decisions knowingly, right? Remember, the first time it's a mistake, the second time it's a choice. Once you understand the root of it, then handle the root of it. I said something the other day on I was very briefly asked to just pop in, I think 5 minutes. And I said, folks, excuse my language, but I said, handle your shit, whatever it is that's keeping you from having the most amazing life right now, in this moment, during the holiday season, then fix it. You're in an upset with your mother because you need to be right. Well, good, then be wrong and call your mother and tell her you love her. Like I said just that. And I think 16 people broke out into tears, according to the guy who was in the room in Minnesota, to the people I was saying it to, because it wasn't so much about the fact that I mentioned mom. It was that I mentioned that you can actually be okay being wrong and have amazing relationships and have a great time instead of having to be right and being stuck. But all of that goes back to what she said about what you made up about yourself based on what you heard. Like, I have always been driven to make money. Okay. In 2018, I was 61 years old. I found out that I created that as a decision I made up based on something I heard my mother and father fight about. Like, who knew? And yes, your answers are inside of you, but we all need help to get them out. Seek help. Now, I've promised you all on my free Friday coaching calls, there's no recruiting, there's no selling anything. The only people I've allowed to sell things are guest speakers who are coaches and say, here's my information. And a lot of you have gotten a lot of great things about that. And I'm not selling you anything, but while we started talking about this, this always happens. We talk about the personal development courses we've taken and people start texting me and say, what was it? What was it? So Casey texted the head of the organization and got us all a $200 discount if you decide you're looking for a personal development course. She had that put in the chat. The Bay 200 is the $200 discount. It's normally a $795 3-day course. And you're going to get it for $595 using that discount, assuming you're interested. You're not, it's all up to you. I'm not selling it. I don't get anything, neither does Casey. We just know what it did for our lives. It was the stepping stone. And she had taken it, 2 years before I did, and said to me after we started dating, which we basically started dating before I took the course, that we could never have a long-lasting relationship unless I took the course. Why? Because she wants to communicate with me at the level she's capable of communicating, and I wouldn't be without those tools. I'm not bringing that up for you to buy the course. I'm bringing it up to ask you, what are you doing? Remember, your success in business is directly proportional to the amount that you invest in you. The more you want your business to grow, the more you got to go. You cannot be the same person in 2022 that you were in 2021 and expect to do more business in 2022. You've got to become a bigger, better version of yourself. Okay, you have to look like, was I confident in 2021? Yes, I was. Do I need to be more confident, more decisive, more committed, more intention in 2022 to create these higher, bigger goals that I want? So as I look at that, I want to venture into one more thing in the last few minutes we have, and that is your context for 2022. Every year for the past several years, in the later part of the year, we're all working on business planning workbooks and designing what our life will look like. Casey and I take it to another level, and we pick a word for each of us individually and for us as a couple as what will be our context for 2022. And I'm able to explain it, but I think she explains it in a much more thorough way than I do. So honey, talk a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, for sure. So how many of you, just by a show of hands, if you're on social media, you'll see people towards the end of the year, beginning of the new year, go, oh, my word for the year is, and people will be picking words. This is my word for the year. That is not what we're talking about. we're actually talking about picking a context. And a context is a word that you choose that serves as a decision-making filter for the year. I'm going to say that again. The word that you choose that is your context is your decision-making filter for the year. So I'll give you an example. My word for 2021 was, or is, because we're still in 2021, unapologetic. And you might think, wow, what's that about? So the context of unapologetic as a filter for me was a reminder to make decisions that were truly aligned with my values and the things that were important for me personally and for us as a family, versus defaulting to making decisions based on other people's expectations, other people's values, other people's demands, or other people's perspectives. And so that's what this year was about. And with the context of unapologetic, it was never having to explain myself to anyone, period. And so that created some really, really incredible decisions, really incredible opportunities, and things that would not have happened otherwise because of those conversations we all have in our heads. And I'm guessing I'm not the only one that has those conversations of other voices and other people. Oh, what are my kids going to say about that? What's my significant other going to say about that? What's my sister saying about that? What's my mom saying about that? What's my, my community saying about that? Like all of those, silencing them to choose a word, unapologetic, to silence the noise and filter and make decisions that are going to be truest to me and my values and us and our family for the year. So your context is a really powerful opportunity for the word that you land on. The word that I'm going into 2020, what was the result, Bruce? Oh my goodness. 95% of the things that I was doing with my time and energy, I realized weren't bringing me joy. And so I stopped. A lot of them were leadership positions that I stepped out of. When we had an opportunity at the beginning of the year, based on decisions that Rick made about where he was going to sell real estate 5 years ago, he was getting stock rewards at the end of every closing that had turned into multiple 7 figures, which is not something we had ever had in retirement before. And we unapologetically decided to cash some of that in and put a down payment on our dream home, which is where we're currently doing this call from, which is outrageous, was outrageous. And we did it unapologetically and are here and are stepping into that and owning that. Outside of that, there's been an entire rebrand unapologetically. Hey, Rick, this business, if you're going to take this business into the next 5 or 10 years based on the last 41, you need a brand that's modern, that's up to date. And so we launched a rebrand. There he is standing on our balcony. We launched a full rebrand of the Rick Jiha sales team. So if you go to rickjihateam.com, you'll see that. In addition, the real estate company that he's with, we have over 2,500 other agents that we're in business with literally all around the world. And so we created a brand and a platform for that with full training and resources to actually put a name behind it and an identity, all of that done unapologetically. So there was huge things that happened this year as a result. And there was people that came into my life that I didn't know this year that were connected to me from other people that asked me to hire them and coach them. One of them, and specifically that has a book deal and a movie deal now as a result. And I'm not building a coaching business or advertising a coaching business. However, I am standing in who I am as a person and all of the work that I've done in my life to get me to this point. And so those are some of the things that happened this year in that context. My context moving into 2022 is optimize. And there's lots of different places to optimize with the things that are in motion, because there's some things that are not optimized right now, which we don't have time for in this call. But as we wrap up, the context that you pick and that you choose as your decision-making filter for 2022 will guide your choices, your outcomes, be your compass, your guiding light that keeps you grounded and centered for the things that are important for you. And you get to decide what those things are. So choose wisely and have some fun. Thanks for having me on, Rick.
Oh, honey, thank you for being on. As you can see, tremendous appreciation for you and what you contributed. I went outside a little bit to kind of show people. the background of our dream home. I want you all to know one thing: whatever you want is possible. All you have to do is decide, because God would not allow you a dream that he wouldn't know that you could actually fulfill. You'd have no way of thinking that up or dreaming that up unless he knew you could do it. And the challenges are there so that once you get there, you'll know that you had to learn those things along the way so that you could get there. All right. The last thing I want to say is the hardest lesson I've learned in life, and it's been the most enjoyable lesson, is that when you experience physical or emotional pain, I promise you, if you have faith and you're grateful for the pain in the minute, you have faith that there is a miracle on the other end, there will be. All the pain I've experienced, and I have experienced a lot in the last 15 years of failure and pain, has led me to today. And yeah, I'm 64. I want you to experience it earlier. And if you're older, I still want you to experience it. It just takes your commitment to yourself and the world you live in. Thanks, guys, for joining us on this special call. Whatever you celebrate, celebrate it well. I celebrate Christmas. Merry, Merry Christmas to all of you.
Merry Christmas to you too.
And I hope you have a great 2022. Take care. We'll
Yeah,
see you in the new
Thank
year.
you, Rick.
Thank you so
Casey.
much. Christmas. Thank you.
Awesome.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.
Merry
so much.
Christmas to
Merry
everyone.
Christmas. Thank you, Rick.
Merry Christmas.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
You guys done yet?
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Keith.
Congratulations, Gina and Greg, on your new home.
Thank you.
Jesus Christ, bless you both. Hallelujah. Praise God. Merry Christmas. Thank you.